Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Optimized AF podcast. This is Blake.
Not just another, but an exciting episode.
Part three of the three-part series.
So this is Stacie, and we're talking about coaching, which is very near and dear to Blake and I's heart. If you didn't listen to the first two, you can go back later or now, doesn't really matter, but we're going to continue that conversation. Today, we really wanted to get to a couple of hot buttons that outside of the book. So we're talking about The Coaching Habit by Michael Stanier, I think maybe is how you say that. So if I butchered that, Michael, I apologize. But we're going to talk a little bit more about our own personal coaching experience today and less about the book specifically. Yeah. But there is a good kind of kickoff topic that we found in the book that I think is incredibly relevant and happens all the time when people say they're coaching. And that is it's advice in the form of a question. So do you want to kind of break that down, Blake, what that looks like? And the examples given is, have you ever thought of,
have you ever considered, did you think about,
and
there's the ones who have become very crafty about this, it's their way of feeling very valuable and yet not spoon feeding in their mind, not spoon feeding the solution, right? So it's sort of it's in the middle of coaching and mentorship. And, the reason this is near and dear to our heart, if I could take one step backwards on this, is that the reason we've broke this book out into a 3-part series and talked about coaching is that kind of more than ever, especially in 2020 and 2021, and really should be the case as it continues forward though, the best type of leadership approach, the best type of parenting approach, the best type of the way to get something better out of somebody else. Let's talk about all of those things combined. I would generalize the statement in saying that your objective is to have somebody realize their full potential. In order for them to do that, sometimes you need to help them navigate through challenges. You need to help them uncover what's holding them back. There's different aspects of it. But at the base level, your objective is to have somebody else understand on their own how they can be at their best.
Which begs the question, I thought about this after the last episode. When you're in a really great partnership / marriage, romantic partnership, let's just call it. Yeah, one at a time, please. Just for me personally, everybody makes their own choices.
That's true, yeah. There's a show that my wife watches where it's not the case.
But for me, I can only handle one James at a time. So
I have said the same thing.
Yeah. So
one James at a time.
James is my person. So I'll say this about James. Sometimes in husband and wife relationships, we're really bad at this, right? We want to solve the problem for our person. We're going to give you all the advice under the sun. So
especially the husbands.
Let's just point the finger.
I'll point it right back at myself because I have done this, and I can tell you exactly. My wife and I had this exact conversation many years ago, early on in our marriage, in the parking lot of a resort right before we went into a staycation. And I love her to death for finally telling me this. Is like, I don't want you to solve it.
Yes.
I just fucking want you to listen.
That's correct.
And I was like,
listen, men, are you hearing this loud and clear?
But we want to, though. That's the guy thing to do. We want to be we want to solve it. We want to be the hero.
Well, when your person's in pain, nothing feels, you want to help that person. And so I would say as you listen to this, and you listen to this series, this is also another example of where it applies in life, that could we show up as better partners for one another, that instead of solving the problem for our partner, we're asking questions to help them find their own way. And I will say, I'll give James a ton of credit. He's actually great at this. And I wasn't used to it in the beginning of our relationship. I was kind of used to somebody jumping in and me pushing back. So he's great at asking me. And he always says, let me clarify what I think you're saying first, and then he'll ask me a question. And so I think it is something that I'm learning in my relationship can be a really powerful way to help one another kind of get there as you're kind of overcoming challenges. But what I think is typical is this fake question of really it's advice in the form of a question. We do it with our children and they see right through it. By the way, if you have teenagers, they're going to call bullshit all over you. They know you're giving them advice. They know you're not asking them a question. So they're pretty savvy about that. So if you're tried that, that's going to backfire. I think it happened under 10, maybe they'll accept it from you, but after that, no way. So I think really thinking about this within the context of that situation, but I think that one thing that we've all experienced as a coach is that I have, and I said this I think previously, I learned so much about myself being a coach that's probably been one of the more transformational aspects of my life is coaching other people because I'm sitting, it's much like this podcast. Blake and I come on here all the time and every time I'm like, man, I really needed that reminder for my life, for myself, for wherever I'm at. And so I think one reason to consider developing a coaching habit is it is just as powerful for you as it is the people that you're coaching. And I think it creates genuine connection. I think it inspires change. And it helps someone else really solve their own challenge. But at the same time, if you're really listening with curiosity, which we talked about, you're going to be learning something for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little sidestep, but I'm reminded of, a coaching experience that was really profound for me. I shared on a previous episode of this 3-part series about how as I became an adult, as I became a parent myself, I could look back on how my dad was as a parent, his parenting style, and I could appreciate where he had actually utilized a lot of these coaching methodologies, whether it was intentional or not, it was just his style. But those were some of the most profound things. And I'll share an example that, as young people do, make stupid mistakes, right?
You're kidding.
Yeah. Well, yep. For anybody who's listening who knows me personally, the way that my dad was. He was a very, he would get, he could get loud. He could be in your face. He could, this was a guy who, he grew up his entire life working with his hands. Farm boy, construction worker. He was hard. And so as a child that, when you messed up, you fully expected the rage, right? Like you fully expected him to go over the top. And I remember I was probably like 11 or 12 years old. I don't remember. Preteen, fell into the wrong group of friends, and it was my first experience of getting involved in smoking pot. And we were just dumb, stupid kids. We're out at a public park at like 10 o'clock at night. Who the hell knew public parks closed? Right? So
you don't know that when you're a teenager.
You don't know that when you're an idiot little
kid.
So, we're sitting at a park bench and I think it was like the first time I'd ever even tried smoking pot. And 2 bicycle police officers rolled up on us and they're, of course, what are you kids doing? Great. Let me call your parents. We're getting in trouble. So as young kids, of course, parents had to come pick you up. So here comes my dad, come to pick me up. And I'm on the receiving end of this and I'm thinking, brace for impact, right? And I get up into the pickup truck and we start driving away. And it is just dead silence as we go down the road. And we're down the road a mile before anything is said. And he just looks over and he says, "What'd you learn?" And then he paused, and it was the silence up front by just a question followed by silence.
Yeah.
And that I will be on my deathbed. I will remember that moment forever because on one hand, I had an expectation that wasn't met. So that was sort of the first thing. I went into it fully expecting this is not going to be the case. But the most profound part about it was that because he did that, it forced me to really think about like, okay, are those really friends of yours? Did you make a good decision? There's going to be consequences for what you did. And I had to do all this and process all this as a young kid. And that stuck with me so incredibly well. Whereas he could have came right in and been like, okay, so here's what you need to do, and you're going to do this, and you're in big trouble. No, ifs, ands, or buts about it, and you're going to do. And he didn't. He didn't do any of that. It was a lot of silence, and it was a couple of questions. Yeah. That was one of the most profound coaching things that I ever received.
Yep. I have a pattern. It's a very similar story to yours where I didn't expect sort of a profound situation to happen. And it did. And I think this should resonate with a lot of people that are leaders, parents, spouses, etc. This very specific example. And it came up earlier this week as I was reflecting on this a little bit. And a lot of us that grew up in untraditional ways or had trauma in our childhood, we get busy, we activate. And there's a reason we do that. We do that because it feels good to move, check boxes. It feels good. It also feels good for people to have a perspective of you that you're superhuman in some ways. Like, it's validation. When I was in
I got to stop you because you used we activate and superhuman, and my mind went to totally, you're describing me like I'm an Avenger.
Yes, you are an Avenger.
Like,
yes.
So we're all superheroes.
We are.
But here's the thing, there's expectations that come with that, right? So that's where you're going with it.
So I remember I was working 3 jobs and going to school, and it was finals week, and I was running a medical office at the time. And I had this 70-something-year-old doctor, Dr. Thomas Werner, and I may have mentioned him before because he was pretty profound influence in my life, in my young life. And he reminded me, I was raised by my grandfather. He reminded me very much of my grandfather. And I was laying on the floor of my office crying, just totally overwhelmed by the week. Just, what am I going to do? I was barely functioning. I wasn't sleeping. Finals, I think it was in my, maybe the first semester of my senior year. So I still had, like, the light was not there. It was there, but it was pretty dim. I still had another semester to go. I was, teaching aerobics, waiting tables on the weekends, and then working at this medical office. And I was getting my chemistry and pharmacology degree. So lab hours, like, it was just bananas. So, and I was sucking at organic chemistry, by the way. Like, I just freaking hated it. So I had my OChem final, I think the next day, and he walked in and he's probably like 6'4". He's a really big dude. I'm laying on the floor, and he said to me, "What's going on?" And I said, I just went on, right? Like the whole diatribe and verbal vomit of just my whole situation. And he said, "Well, you continue to choose it because this is not the first time I've found you on the floor of your office. And you continue to have 3 jobs. You can, I want you to finish school." He said, "But, and you're very good at externally balancing all these things, and most people never see you on the floor of your office. You're pretty good at hiding this." But he's like, "It's not the first time I've found you here." He said, "So," he's like, "the best thing I can ask you right now is, why are you continuing to choose this in your life?" And as I've become a mom and a leader and other things, it's come up a lot in my life that when I start choosing to activate in more than one area, when I gravitate to maybe starting to teach fitness again or something, it's like it triggers something for me now where I'm like, what's going on for me that I'm needing that validation, or I'm needing for people to feel that way about me? But it comes up a lot as a leader, because you'll have always someone on your team, or typically someone on your team, that's the doer, that's the superhuman doer. And they work crazy amounts of time and hours. And you're thinking, why are they're choosing to do it. You're not telling them to do that. They do it. And the question is, why are they doing it? So Blake and I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the more magic moments I can think of as a coach is getting someone to get to the why behind why they pattern the way that they do. And as they think about their life, whether it's activating and overcommitting, whether it's, becoming overwhelmed and deactivating, whatever that is, really helping someone by asking questions, not answering those questions. But I always, go back to my Dr. Tom moment and think, what is the question I can ask this person to try to help them navigate to a place of saying, yeah, I've done this over and over again in my life and my career. I do it in every aspect of their life. People typically don't change this pattern just for work. They do it all the way around their life. And try to help them dig into the why in their history and in their programming and in their life they continue to choose this, and that it is a choice, that they are choosing this every day of their life. And I think if I were to cite as a coach myself, what has been really incredibly rewarding as a leader and a coach is helping people find their way to that place.
Yeah, I think the thing you're touching on there, though, is that when you get someone to arrive at that place, what they need to get there in order to affect change. If you don't really understand why you're doing something, right, let's be honest, you're not going to make changes. You're not going to make lasting changes. You might make something that's short term, possibly. But in order to really understand why you do the things you do, and then make a conscious and an intentional decision to make those changes, you have to have someone help you arrive at that discovery place of, why do I even do this? Why do I act this way? So, the power behind this, I think there was something that you touched on, Stacie, that we didn't really nail home, and I want to bring it back to light, is that there's so much incredible value of adopting this methodology for the coach themselves. Mm-hmm. It's not just the person on the receiving end, although you and I would both argue for our listeners to adopt this from the standpoint that it is the best way for you to bring value to the people that you coach, to the people that you lead, the people that you parent, whatever the case is. However, though, you stand to gain so much by doing this, and there's so much discovery that you have about yourself as you're helping somebody else uncover what's in their way, uncover how they can best navigate a challenge, uncover how they can best deal with an otherwise uncomfortable situation. They will teach you in return, just the way that you're helping guide them towards some discovery that's going to help bring value to their life.
I think if you're a CEO or a leader of leaders, it's a good thing to consider that leadership development sometimes gets thrown around as this big consuming program. And Blake and I have talked about this a lot before. And when I developed, Lead with Trust originally, it was really built on this premise, this teaching coaching habits. And what I was trying to also convey to the CEOs that I was talking to is, yes, is it beneficial to the coachees, to the teams? Absolutely. There's absolute value in having leaders show up as coaches. But I'll tell you, more importantly, it's going to help your leadership team figure out their own stuff as well. So I feel like that duality of coach-coachee learning, if again, you're not just doling out advice and just, asking the fake question. If you're really coaching and listening to learn and understand about the person that's in front of you, the things that we can learn from one another about how somebody processes and navigates their own behavior and their own patterning is such a lesson for coaches. So I think if you're in the role of trying to understand how to help your organization and your leaders level up, and it just feels like, man, I don't want to, one more book or one more YouTube video, which I think can be helpful. Don't get me wrong. It can feel very consuming. I think consider breaking down, as we have in the last few episodes, just some simple coaching tips and tools for your leadership team and have them try them out and hold one another accountable to reflect on how that's working. We gave you an assignment last episode to, ask a question and then go deeper with that person. So the "and what else" question. And I think those are the things that if you repeat those habits, that's why it's called the coaching habit. Yet again, I'll say it again, it takes time. And if you, again, listen all the way back to episode 1 of this whole journey that Blake and I have been on.
Season 1. Yep.
Season 1. We started talking about atomic habits, and habit stacking and habit building, and how do you build that habit is repetition and intention and understanding triggering. So I think when you understand how to start these conversations and how to dig a little bit deeper and how to listen to the answers, I think the magic that can happen is really helping people navigate, but also showing up better as your own best self as a coach.
Well, and something I want to call out for people listening to this is that although this may seem the way that we've, kind of conveyed this in this 3-part series as a new thing, something you need to try, something that is possibly not in place today. What I want to challenge you to do is to look around your organization, and more than likely, and it might even be you, but more than likely, someone that already does these things very naturally. Maybe they do them very intentionally. They've gone through something similar. They've gone through training. Maybe it was the NLP certification or whatever. I don't know. But more than likely, it's somebody who, I'll put it this way. If you have somebody in your organization that people outside of their own team come to them, it's very likely they do at least some components of coaching. It tends to attract people to it because you are giving them much more value than just providing an answer or a solution. And that's what keeps people coming back, because they know you're not just going to spoon feed them the thing. Oh, you want to go solve that? Yeah, you do A, B, and C. Go solve your problem. Great. They wouldn't put out that fire. And maybe they're going to come back to you if they run into a big roadblock in the, that person had a really great idea. They helped me with the last time. But when you're really coaching somebody and you're really helping them develop to where then they have that very, very self-aware knowledge of, I have grown, I have become better, a better version of myself because of this coaching, they will continue to come back. So I think if you identify someone in your organization that does have people very much like a magnet, just attract to them, there's likely that you have an example within your team right now that the rest of the leadership team, like you said, Stacie, or even middle managers can learn from. The book goes into the part that we wanted to kind of, on the bookends of this 3-part series, we talk about how do you get someone to internalize the real focus on what is the issue, right? And so we talked last time, you say, if depending on the rapport, you could have the floodgates just completely open up on this thing. The question is, well, what is the real challenge here for you? And I loved how the author broke this down, because they said, they broke it into that sentence into 3 parts. They said, look, you can ask, what's the challenge? And you talk about it and you go, okay, great. Well, there's a lot of challenges. There's so many moving pieces. Let me tell you all about what's going on here. There's this, and then, got Susie down in the mailroom. That's a problem. And Jeremy's just a guy doesn't have the skill set to do what he's doing there. And I think he's completely drowning. You got this and you got that and you got that system, and they will open up to everything. So then he says, okay, but let me change the question. Not just what's the challenge, what's the real challenge? Okay, now I got to get more specific. I got to think about that. That's a great question for me as a coachee. It makes me stop, makes me go, okay. Well, I think the Jeremy thing's solvable. We can train him. And Susie, actually just a little cultural conversation, and they start to kind of find solutions. What's the real challenge for you? Okay, shit, now I got to really stop and think about this, because now it's about me. What can I really take control of? So there's actually a lot of value in these questions of how they were crafted, because it's so easy for us as coaches to ask questions that are a little too general and they don't really lead someone towards a really great solution. And so that last question, they call it the focus question, and it is to narrow down into exactly what does this person need to focus on finding a solution for. Not my job to give them the solution, but if they arrive at the right focus, they will come up with a solution.
And it creates ownership, which
Yes.
I love.
Yes.
Because if you have been a leader for any length of time, you probably have some folks that struggle with owning their part of that challenge. So I love the focus question here, because it helps you help them own where they are contributing to the problem or contributing to the solution or not. And I think, again, it's very easy to point externally, especially I always think about social media, like we can always get wrapped up in everybody else's problems, but our own challenges are only solved by really looking in the mirror at how we're showing up. So I think I love that series of questions as well. And I think that's kind of why we said this is like the next level coaching, this 3rd episode, because if you want people to change behavior, ownership and reflection and digging into the why behind why they are patterning in the way that they are is really the only way. Now, if you're a leader, that's important because you're probably going to be leading this person for more than a few weeks. Like usually you're with people for years, theoretically.
Yeah.
If you're talking about coaching your teenagers, that person's your responsibility. Let's face it, beyond 18 years old, as parents, our kids are really in our purview for their whole lives. And so how can we help the people that we love and care about, our partners as well, really start to hone in on their ownership of it and get to the real challenge? And that's not to say there isn't value in venting. I think sometimes there can be value in just somebody unloading and I just want you to listen and not solve the problem for me, husbands of the world. But I think what husbands of the world could do better in helping that is ask some questions versus providing the answers, and then helping the person who's in front of you, your partner, try to narrow in on what area of that do they play into and what's really their biggest concern. So if you take nothing else away from this, maybe showing up as a better partner in life, but hopefully as leaders, you'll find that this is valuable as well to help people own where they are in the solution or the problem.
Yeah. So what we would like you guys to do, so let's think about what we covered in this 3-part series. When you go into developmental conversations, so the book touches on this. We didn't go into detail on the 3-part series. We really encourage you to pick up the book. It is a great read. It's a super easy read.
Super simple, yeah.
But they talk about performance conversations and developmental conversations, right? Performance is like, I need to go put out that fire. I need to perform. Now, the developmental conversations is around more of like, how do I make sure the fire doesn't even spark up in the first place, right? So just to use that as an example. When you're approaching these types of conversations, whether it be a performance conversation or a developmental opportunity for your team, we implore you to put these into practice. Okay, so we're going to break them down for you again. The idea, first and foremost, you are not there to solve the damn problem as much as you're going to want to, because especially, let's face it, as leaders, and especially those middle managers that are quote unquote working leaders, you know that if you don't solve it, it's likely going to cause more work for you,
yes.
Right? That's a dilemma that most of us get into. We say, God, if I do it, it's going to take me 30 minutes. But if I teach you how to do it, it's going to take me 3 hours. You know what? Shit, I'm going to do it myself. Yeah. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the team in the long haul. That problem's going to come up again and again and again. It's just dumb math right here. But if it's 30 minutes, it's only going to take a few times. And all of a sudden, you're at a net loss in terms of the time invested. So digress from that. You need to spend the time in imploring these. Ask the questions. Don't provide the advice.
Yep.
It's very hard to do. The most difficult part about it is staying quiet.
Yep.
So question 1.
What's on your mind?
What's on your mind?
And then once they start down that road, the first problem is never the real problem. So, and what else? Digging into the layers underneath the initial reaction. And again, you can use those initial reactions to develop rapport, not chit chat, but genuinely reflecting on where that person is.
And the author talks about how in his personal experience, he's become well known as a very, very, I guess I would say sought after coach. I would imagine to some degree, but he talks about how in the and what else is nearly never less than 3 times.
Yeah.
Now he says that on the backside of that, it's not like you go on and on and on. You're nearly never more than 7, he says, but you're not usually getting through the layers of the onion until you ask it at least a few times. You're just not going to get to the root of what's really going on. So he says it's usually a 3 to 5 of saying, yeah, well, okay, and what else is going on? What else is on your mind? What else is keeping you up at night? What else has been a distraction for you? There's so many different ways you can ask this question, by the way. I want people to really know that. You don't have to verbatim use this, but it is a great place to start.
Yep. And I think, as you master those skills and those habits, to habit stack on top of that, we mentioned customizing. So that's something that you can do, start to customize these questions, and then go into this focus question series. So walking through these focus questions to get people to own their part and to focus on the element that they can shift and change and not externalize out and point fingers, if you will, on all the external factors that are outside of their control, because they are choosing it for some reason, and getting to the base behavioral element will end up having the pattern dissolve at some point, if you can get to that point with someone.
Yeah. So the exercise in the next week, I want you guys to think about how you can make an intentional effort to approach a conversation with somebody. Try this in the business aspect. Try it in the office. Try it with one of your team. Certainly try it at home with your kids. Maybe you leave your spouse to after you've mastered it.
2.0.
Yeah. Let's evolve that before you go down that path. It might open up too many other conversations. But go into it with that intention. And I think, Stacie, you said this in I think part 2. Be very open with them. Say, I want to try something different with you. And that's okay. I mean, you don't have, this is not like a secret, kind of unspoken society around this stuff. You just say, hey, look, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach with you. And I want you to participate. My expectation of you is that you really give this an intentional effort. And so let's get started. So what's on your mind? Right? You can just launch right into it.
Yep.
But it's very good to be open with them and say, look, you're used to a different style from me, and I'm changing things up. And so I want to be very open with you that I'm doing this. Okay.
Yep.
And then launch into this series of questions. Again, I sound like a broken record, but the biggest part is to remind yourself to stay silent, fight off that advice monster, and then work through the discovery process with them of getting to the root cause of what is really the challenge, what's the thing that they're facing, how do they want to focus on it, and what's the biggest challenge for them personally. And then you can start to launch into the other questions that are in this book. That starts to get into more of the solution-oriented things about how do they then go take action forward. But that part of it can only really be effective after you've gone through the discovery of these first 3 questions.
So we want to hear from you how this is working, how you're applying it. If you need an accountability buddy, we're on social media and on the major channels. So share with us and share back, at some point where you are in this journey and how you are at developing this new habit that we believe is one of the more powerful leadership habits you can develop. And with that, we're going to wrap for this 3-part series and this episode specifically. And we will see you next week with a new topic and potentially a guest. I can't remember.
Yes. Thank you again for listening, everybody. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, go to our YouTube channel if you want to see us perform in this journey that we're on, and share it with somebody. Share it with somebody else. If you've been listening to us and you do take an opportunity to listen in every week, we really ask for some help in spreading the love. So share this with somebody that you think would benefit as well, and we really appreciate you guys.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Rayhans and at Stacie Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.